everyone. My name is Chad Erickson, and I'm the Vice President of Strategy at MyAdvice. And joining me today on our podcast is our special guest, Irnise Williams. And Irnise, my goodness, Irnise has an incredible background. Got introduced to Irnise at a conference earlier this year, and as we were both on faculty at this conference, and recognized what a tremendous asset she is to this industry. So a little background on Irnise. And Irnise, I'm going to let you talk a little bit more about your background.
Yeah.
But Irnise started as a nurse, and so which is phenomenal. But that wasn't enough. Irnise then, after being a nurse for many years, became a lawyer. And she now, with that expertise and that knowledge, she knows how practices think. She knows the challenges that you maybe as a what I call a nursepreneur. I think we're sort of dubbing that as a new term. But these nurse entrepreneurs who are starting their med spas or their own clinics, there's a lot to navigate in this world. And Irnise, because of her expertise, again, as a nurse provider and as an attorney, brings a tremendous amount of knowledge and is really helping change the landscape because she comes from a place of both empathy as well as leadership to be able to help navigate what is a fun and exciting field, but what can also have its own downfalls. But Irnise, tell our audience today, joining us on our podcast, a little bit more about you and sort of your journey to this, because that's quite unique to shift. And my gosh, it kind of shows me, how intelligent and how driven and how passionate you are. But tell our audience a bit more about your journey and sort of how that all came to be.
Yeah, so I started my career 15 years ago as a nurse. I loved it. I knew that I was passionate about helping people, but you can quickly see once you get into the healthcare industry that it can be very difficult to actually help people because there's no continuity once they're leaving your care. So if it's primary care, if it's inpatient care, and I noticed that, and this was before the Affordable Care Act. I know some people maybe not even know life before then, especially new nurses
Right.
who were so young when that passed. Like, what is life before? A lot more people had access to care. And so I decided that I wanted to go to law school, which gave me an option and opportunity to either do policy work or to do legal work or to do advocacy. Like, it gave me a lot of options and opportunity. And in law school, I was able to see that there are so many disconnects within our industry, especially between the intersection of health and the law. And so when I started my firm, I wanted to begin to build the bridge between health and the law for healthcare providers who are overwhelmed and overburdened with regulations that they have to comply with while being responsible for patients, and then also having to protect their license. That's a lot of responsibility on top of all the pressure and stress of taking care of people in patient care. And so that's kind of where I kind of figured out that's what I wanted to do. And over the last few years, things have just really grown because a lot of people are going into entrepreneurship and trying to figure out this health and law thing together.
Well, and that kudos to you. I cannot imagine that how difficult that was, as you were also, you have a family and everything else on top of that. But wow, that's so impressive, and I think it's so needed. This is my 24th year of being a consultant and an advisor to medical and dental practices. And so I've seen a lot of changes, and I have loved the evolution that we're seeing right now, which is, a lot of these nurses who have an opportunity to say, I have a choice. I don't necessarily want to be primary care or emergency, and some of them do. And to those that want to stay there, that's great. But those are saying, hey, I want something different. It's awesome. And I know that you serve both those that are just kind of getting started, well, those that are established. But let's maybe start with the sort of the new practice owners. And let me ask you a question, Irnise. If you could help somebody before they start their practice, like some of the pitfalls you've seen, what are a handful of things that you wish you could tell somebody before they get started that would help them avoid maybe some potential challenges down the road? What would those be?
I would say before you invest in any type of business, go to a conference that gives you a full perspective of the experiences that you're going to have in that business. I see a lot of people take one training course or they go to one coaching session and all of a sudden they're ready to launch their business. And they really don't have a full perspective of what opportunities are actually out there. But just because you may be interested in one area of business, it may not actually be an area that you want to do for a long period of time. And there may be other things that are out there. And you can really only find that out by going and attending events that will give you access to information that isn't biased, right? If I'm a coach and all I'm doing
Right.
is coaching you on one skill, of course, I'm going to sell it as the best thing ever. But going to a conference where there's a lot of education and people can't necessarily sell from the stage gives you an opportunity to at least learn before you execute. I think the other thing is to really understand the basics of business, because a lot of people jump into business, they have the clinical skills, they've done all the training, they're established, but then they're like, wait, what am I supposed to do with all the money that's coming in and out? How am I supposed to pay myself?
Right.
Who do I need on my team? When should I hire a CPA? And that slows people down from growing and being able to scale their business, because you're trying to do it all on your own. And QuickBooks may seem like it's easy, but after a while, it can get a little bit more complicated. And I think the third thing that I would ask people to do is to really decide what the future looks like. Like, if you want to be a solo practitioner forever, there's a way that you set up your business that you still have to have some type of support and a backup option just in case something happens to you. But if you want to grow and scale your business, open a second location, potentially sell your business, there are some foundational things that you have to do in the beginning of the business that actually makes it easier for you to get to your goals. But many people just start like, oh, I'm just going to start. I don't even know what I want to do next, and just see what
Right.
happens, which can be okay sometimes. But then you end up having to go back to square one, start all over, and then begin to build the way that you actually desire.
Oh my gosh, Irnise, you are saying the best things, and I hope that our audience heard what you said. I'm gonna summarize two, I think, important critical takeaways. One is have a vision for what you want this to be, and two, set goals. Those two elements are going to separate you from everybody else. If you are just kind of saying, "Hey, this is a cool space, and I want to be in aesthetics, and I'm going to go down this path," and you don't really know what you want that to look like, the type of care you want to provide, and what your goals are, you're going to get into trouble. And I'll give you a
Mhm.
great example of that. I've seen over the last couple of years with this influx, those that got into the space and they're like, um, suddenly upside down because maybe they weren't financially ready to take on a device. And it's not a knock against the device. That
Mhm.
device is phenomenal and does great things.
Mhm.
But is your cash flow able to support it? Do you have enough
Mhm.
clients coming in that actually want that?
Yeah.
Or is it going to burden you with so much debt that you're in trouble? I've
Mhm.
also seen some where they're not listening to the right voices, those that are really what I'd call the recognized and sort of vetted professionals, because there are a lot of
Yeah.
different consultants out there who will say a lot of different things because it's all about the money. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, I've seen practices just, it's like a ship without a rudder, right? They don't know where they're going, and they're suddenly shifting from this to that.
Yeah.
And now they're doing what I call getting in their own way, as opposed
Mhm.
to being grounded. This is my
Yeah.
vision. This is where I'm aiming. These are my goals. This is what's going to take to get there. And these are my mentors and my experts along the way that are going to help me
Yeah.
do that I'm going to lean into.
Mhm.
I mean, there's so many. We could dive into what you're talking about, what you just summarized in 5 minutes for
Yeah.
hours,
Yeah.
which is phenomenal. What else? I mean, what's the biggest pitfall you've seen, the biggest mistake that you're seeing practices make today?
I think I mostly see practices who, again, just aren't prepared to launch. So they launch with just what
Yeah,
they have. Like, I have these few things, I have a website, I have an EMR or I have a scheduling system, and I'm just going to launch. And they haven't necessarily
yeah,
thought about ways to protect their business, how to market their business, how to grow, who their clientele is. And so it's like, again, they're just randomly doing things, listening or collecting pieces of information online, and there's no structure to the process. And so in
right.
that, they then spend a lot of money, waste a lot of money, and do things that like slow them down or force them to close their business because they don't feel like they were ready, but they just weren't necessarily prepared for the things to come. And I think now in
Right.
the industry, it's so flashy to spend a lot of money on everything versus spending money on the right things. And I remind people, like, if you spend money on the right things in the beginning, you have a strong foundation, the right people in place, you can then have more money later to spend on the flashy things that you really want to do. But it doesn't
Yep.
matter if you have 10,000 brand shoots, if you don't have a strong foundation in your business, those pretty pictures don't mean anything and they're not going to be useful for your business.
Well said. Well said. Have a game plan and then stick to that game plan. and be smart with the business. It can get, it's almost like the child parent syndrome, right? Where somebody, a kid that's graduating college expects that they should be at the same place financially that their parents are, who have worked for years. And not to say you can't get there quicker. I think there's more opportunities today than certainly I think I had.
Mhm.
And so I think you can do things faster, but it's still,
Yeah.
don't spend things on the non-essentials. Stick to your plan. And
Mhm.
within a short period of time, you're going to have more than enough to do those fancy, cool things. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Irnise, today we're not trying to dive into too many details. We're trying to really set the table for the things that you offer and why it's important that they speak to somebody like you. And I hope
Mhm.
they do call you directly because you have
Mhm.
such great knowledge. But even if I'm an established practice, so we're kind of shifting gears a
Yeah.
little bit. I'm an established practice. I've been around for a little while. I've got good revenues. I've got a good client base. Um, where do they then sometimes run into challenges, and how do you help a group like that to make sure that they're set up for continued success?
Yeah, so usually for established business owners, they feel that they're in a good place until something happens, right? A patient
Okay.
complaint, someone files a board complaint, or someone tries to sue them, or they just have a bad outcome. And then all of a sudden, all of the things that you thought that you had together are now they're showing themselves. And so what I usually find are people don't have policies, certain policies to make sure that they're protected and they're following a systematic way of navigating their business. They're bringing on new hires, and this person is doing things one way and this person is doing things another way. And when you run into an issue, you now have to figure out, like, who do I need to retrain? And you have to start again from scratch because everybody needs to be on the same page doing things differently. And now there's a discomfort, and you have to kind of make a lot of adjustments, which then slows down your revenue because you weren't necessarily prepared for these mishaps. And so I tell people it's easy to feel that your business is together, but when you have somebody from the outside looking in, they can identify some of those blind spots and help you put systems in place so that instead of you training because there's an issue or an error, you now have said, you know what, let's do monthly trainings just to revisit some of our policies. Oh, just to make sure everybody's on track, just to make sure everybody's competent. That's a different feel and flow of business than now trying to shut the business down because everybody needs to be retrained because someone made a mistake. And so that's what I usually see with business owners who feel that they have everything together, is that when you start asking a few questions about different areas of their business, they'll say, oh, I never thought about that, or I wasn't thinking about that,
Right.
or I don't have that. And that's okay. I think compliance and legal, it's an evolution. It's never done. Something is always changing, something needs to be updated. But when you have someone who can support you and identify those issues with you, then at least you can get ahead of the game instead of being behind.
My goodness, you bring such wisdom to this because there's so many. It's the blind spots, right? It's the things. Oh my gosh, I wish I would have thought about that. I didn't know that was possible. And how do you protect yourself from those in advance? And that's why having those conversations with you, bringing on you into the practice, really becomes an extension, becomes a protection.
Mm-hmm.
And you alluded to another part there too, kind of that compliance and the training of your staff members. But those employee contracts, how critical are those?
Yeah. So, especially now where a lot of people are coming in, learning, taking the skills or taking the training that you're offering and then going off on their own, that doesn't really help businesses build. And so, in order to identify and really bring in people who are going to help you build your business, you need to have contracts in place that are very clear, that speak to responsibilities and obligations, without necessarily violating any other laws. Because sometimes people want to say, well, I want to put a non compete in and that's going to protect me. Not understanding things have changed, times have changed. That's not the norm anymore. But there are ways that you can structure your contracts to make sure that you're protecting your intellectual property, your talent, and your
Right.
team to make sure that you can continue to grow because they're now valuable once they're trained and now an asset to your business versus, being detrimental because they're taking their skills somewhere else.
Um, so well said. It's exactly it. It's like, yeah, the non-competes of what we thought are they're gone, right? I
They're
mean, the
gone.
right to work is really, really strong, but there
Mm-hmm.
are other ways to protect your intellectual property and the things that you do,
Yeah.
and it's your brand, and you need to make sure that that is sound.
Mm-hmm.
Protecting against any potential libel or slander down the road, all those things that
Mm-hmm.
are so critical in today's world. So it's, oh my gosh, you've given us a ton to really think about.
Yeah.
Um, Bernice, these practices, they are so hungry to do well, and you bring so much to the table. I would love for anyone who's listening today and I'm sure there's many who are being like, I need to talk to her today. I need to, these are things I have not even thought about, but they're probably keeping somebody who's listening today up at night because they're worried, but they also want to grow and they just need the right guidance. So, with that in mind, how do they contact you? Will you please give our group today your website, your phone number, and your
Yeah.
email address so that all of our listeners can get in touch with you?
Definitely. So you can find me at Irnise, IRNISE Williams.com. That's my website, has all of my information, resources, links, and things of that nature. And a lot of people usually find me through social media. I'm your nurse lawyer on all social media platforms where I share a lot of information about business compliance, and building a sustainable and profitable business. So
Wonderful. Irnise, it has been an absolute pleasure and delight to have you join us today. I know that our audience who's listening and watching, wherever they are, has been taking some copious notes, and they're saying, I need to talk to her today because
yeah,
of what you've discussed. So thank you so
thank
much
you.
for being such a great resource and a great partner for MyAdvice and all of our clients. We thank you, and we will see you, I know, on stage at one of the upcoming
Yes,
conferences. So thank you so
thank
much,
you.
and
Thank you
thanks to
so
our audience for
much.
participating. We'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.